Finding full-time work is tough, and if you're living with a disability, it can be even more difficult.
But we found there is help out there, and they're always looking for new clients.
David Fry has lots of experience in food services, but 5 years ago, he needed help finding a new job.
I had difficulties in the last job that I had. My mother decided to look into Howard Services and hooked me up to Project Hire.
It's a program that got its start as our society made a shift to a more community-centered focus for people with mental disabilities.
Supported employment really came about in the early 80s by offering opportunities to help people to connect with employers and be hired outside of sheltered employment into traditional jobs.
Sheltered workshops were places where people with disabilities were warehoused and given simple tasks. Up until 2002, they were the only work options for people with disabilities, but Project Hire set out to change that. The national unemployment average in the United States is at 6.7%, but the unemployment rate for people with all types of disabilities is much higher at 12.8%.
Sometimes it's hard to, for a person with disabilities to write up a resume.
On one side, we're helping individuals with disabilities discover what their interests and talents are, so that when we partner with businesses and learn what their needs are, then we can make the right match.
And for Fry, that match was in the kitchen at the Wake Robin retirement community.
The expectations with Dave, myself, were pretty much mapped out, so there was the ability for us to actually throw Dave right into the midst of it.
5 years later, he's continued to take on more responsibilities, from dishes to prep work to actual cooking. Project Hire is currently helping 180 people like Fry find work in Vermont at more than 100 different businesses, mostly part-time.
Project Hire is a lot like a temp agency, except the relationship doesn't end when they place someone in a job. They continually check in to make sure the relationship is working for the new employee and the staff.
We would go with them on their first day of employment and help them to become familiar with the site, help them become familiar with the work culture, and connect with their co-workers.
David has some advice for businesses looking to join the program.
Give people with disabilities a chance to not category that we have a disability, but to look at our ability to doing things.
At the end of the day, Project Hire staff say they'll know they found success when they've worked themselves out of a job.
If you or your business is interested in working with Project Hire, you can find more information about that company on our website. A recent healthcare cost analysis says the single-payer system will be much more expensive than originally thought. A UMass study paid for by the state said the new healthcare system would cost $1.6 billion in taxpayer money. A new study by Avalier Health Consultants estimated it will cost as much as $2.2 billion. This study was commissioned by the state's hospital association. The consultants say the earlier study overestimates the amount of administrative savings that will be found through single-payer.
What we found, though, were a couple of assumptions in that were valid at face point, but if you kind of started looking at them and pulling them apart a little bit, it did make you start to stop and question things a little bit.
Even if you went with that figure, what it shows is that Green Mountain Care can cover all Vermonters and bring up, on average, folks' benefits level to a better place than they are today for the same or less cost.
The consultants say that price range is only an estimate and could change. The governor called a group of state transportation workers boneheads. Now state employees and members of his own party are reacting to these words. The issue came about when Mount Anthony Union High School put up signs along state highways boasting their 25-year wrestling winning streak. VTrans officials told the town of Bennington these signs need to come down because they're in the state's right-of-way along the road. When Governor Shumlin was told what was happening, he said he would try to, quote, get the boneheads in state government to retract that demand. The state employees union reacted to those comments.
To be called a bonehead and be totally disrespectful for those AOT workers that are only trying to uphold the laws of the state is a huge slap in the face.
I just thought it was out of order to call state employees who are doing their job names which I don't think were appropriate.
The governor issued a statement in response to the backlash. He says that nothing about the disagreement over the sign, quote, should detract from the high regard I have for my AOT crews and staff, who are the best in the nation. A 911 call of a shooter in the building sent Winooski schools into lockdown. Police from nearly every agency in Chittenden County, along with Vermont State Police and the Marshal Service, had the school surrounded. They were searching for a possible armed gunman linked to a nearby home invasion. A gunman was not found inside, and authorities say they aren't sure if the suspect ever entered the building.
It was really scary being in a closet with a lot of kids and not knowing what was happening.
We were told by the police through the door to get on the ground, and then they had our coach and they asked him who he was and who was in there, and then they came in.
We didn't get any notifications. We had to find out just by seeing the lights. No automated phone calls.
Winooski police say at this point no one is in custody, and they say the public should not be at risk because they believe the home invasion was linked to a drug-related scenario and the victims were likely targeted.
Authorities say an electrical problem sparked a large fire in downtown Newport. That fire broke out in a multi-unit apartment building Thursday on Central Street. With so many other nearby buildings at risk, it quickly turned into a 5-alarm response. The Red Cross is helping 4 families who lived in those apartments. There were no reports of any injuries. And the man behind a forest fire in Mount Tabor has pleaded guilty. Jack Dixon of Rutland admitted to setting the 2012 fire at the Green Mountain National Forest, which wiped out 6 acres. Dixon was hit with a number of fines and is now banned from National Forest for 2 years. In Florida, people in several homes about 20 miles north of St. Petersburg have been evacuated because of a sinkhole. Officials say the ground is so unstable the homes will have to be demolished, but no one was hurt.
Passengers on a Southwest Airlines flight got the scare of a lifetime when the pilot came over the loudspeaker and said, "We're going down." Then the plane took a nosedive. People on board started calling and texting their loved ones thinking this was it. Southwest says the flight headed into Raleigh experienced irregular cabin pressure, so the pilot did an emergency drop to 25,000 feet. The plane landed safely a few minutes later.
File this one under better late than never. A Pennsylvania newspaper is retracting an editorial it wrote 150 years ago, criticizing President Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. In the 1863 paper, the Harrisburg Patriot and Union described his speech as, quote, silly remarks that deserved a veil of oblivion.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of the greatest speeches ever. All right, that's a wrap.
Just some silly remarks. Gary, over to you.